LAN Infotech CEO Michael Goldstein joins this week to discuss news from Kaspersky, Ingram's biggest competitor, and the hardware market, plus a special joint appearance with Rick Jordan on his podcast All In. It's ChannelPro Weekly number 227. Where has that hand been? Hello and welcome to ChannelPro Weekly episode number 227. My name is Matt Whitlock, technology editor, online director, and your host of this fine show for folks out there like you, the VARs, the IT integrators, the IT consultants, the managed service providers, I said VAR, it means value added reseller, if I remember correctly. So double time for those out there who do those kinds of things. Basically, if you sell or implement technology solutions, service technology solutions for other businesses, you are in the right place. If you operate a water slide at a local Six Flags, you gotta have something. You gotta do something while you're sitting there watching kids fly down the slide. So thanks for joining us, one and all. Joining me this week, back returning from a glorious vacation that I'm sure he's going to rub in my face. Please welcome executive editor Rich Freeman.
No, I will not rub it in your face. I promise. Although it was glorious, it was really good. But now I am paying what I sometimes refer to as the vacation penalty. I'm a big believer in especially if you work for somebody and they give you vacation days, you got to use them. It's important to take the time off, recharge, rest up. But then when you come back, those first few days can be brutal. So I'm getting a little of that this week. But thankfully, it is a shorter than usual week, which helps.
Yeah. Well, it just means you'll have to do a little bit more extra work next week as well, I guess. But well, tell us about your vacation real quick. Where'd you go? What'd you do?
So I was in Santa Fe, New Mexico, which is, I've been there 3 times in the past. It's been a long while. I keep meaning to look up how long it's been since I was there. It's got to be 6-8 years, maybe even more since I was there. And I had a great time. Every time I've gone in the past, it has always been very sunny, very hot, and I expected the same this time of year. It was a little cooler and cloudier the first part of the week, but museums and galleries and amazing restaurants, and there was plenty of stuff to do. So yeah, I had a great time.
Well, that sounds good. You sound recharged. You sound refreshed, and it's wonderful to have you back. I think Eric Simpson and I, who was my guest co-host last week, I think we did an okay job trying to emulate and impersonate Rich while covering the news. But I will tell you, Rich, and for those who listen to the show a long time, there is no one who does what you do better than you, because you just know all the backstory and you're able to kind of put it all together and tie a bow on it. And I just don't have that capability, I guess. So, well, I think we did okay. And a big thanks to Eric Simpson for joining me last week. Did you listen to that one?
I have not heard it yet. This has been, like I said, a lot of catching up to do. So I have not gotten a chance to listen to that yet. And it may be this weekend before I get a chance to, but I will definitely do that. And if for no other reason, that I can't wait to find out where the show title came from. So.
yeah, that one you'll be able to figure that one out. I think fairly early on, if I remember correctly. But it was pretty good. You can just kind of skip over the segments where we just make fun of you, ad nauseum, and then
I assumed there was some of that.
I'm kidding. So Rich, I want to talk about next week because that's important, but our guest is waiting in the wings, and I really want to bring him in because I'm so excited that he's back joining us. He's the president and CEO of LAN Infotech, a Fort Lauderdale-based MSP that helps clients achieve success and grow their business. He's a cyber awareness speaker, a Microsoft certified customer immersion experience trainer. I need to ask what the heck that means because that sounds really interesting. And he's also a returning guest host. Please welcome Michael Goldstein. Welcome, Michael.
Hey, thank you for having me. And hey, what's so unique about Santa Fe, Rich? I just got to ask.
It's a relatively small city, but if you're into the 3 things that I love on vacation, if you're into sun, great food, and art, it's just a great place to be, and very low key. It's a very relaxing place to hang out. So yeah, I highly recommend Santa Fe to folks who have not thought about that as a place to go. Check it out. I've always really enjoyed being there.
Just had to ask.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. And Michael, it's great to have you back. Before I'm going to have you introduce yourself in a second, but Rich, I want to talk about next week because next week's important. Because next week we've got something coming up. We're super excited about it. It's also in the southwesterny kind of area. What is it?
Yeah, not too far from New Mexico. Next week, we and the rest of the ChannelPro team, we are all in Dallas, Texas, for the latest ChannelPro SMB Forum event. This is taking place Monday, June 6th and Tuesday, June 7th. The main day is the 7th. We've got some very interesting pre-day activities and a cocktail reception taking place on Monday the 6th as well. You've heard us, if you're a regular listener or viewer, you've heard us talk about this before, but we're going to be talking about cybersecurity in a session that I'll be moderating, which is sort of built around security storytelling, because I love the stories that security experts tell me every time I interview them. And so you will learn some really actionable information about securing yourself and your customers more effectively, but you'll also hear some very entertaining stories from the security front lines. We have another entertaining but informative session about hiring and retention, huge issue right now. And so we have a session that we sort of modeled after the classic TV game show, The Dating Game, about how to win the recruitment war for that talented tech out there and then keep them on board. We've got a managed services strategy session where some folks who consult with MSPs and in some cases also have expertise specifically in mergers and acquisitions are going to be talking about the landscape out there, the competitive landscape and the M&A landscape, and providing some concrete advice for what you need to do going forward there. We've got a session about getting into Microsoft Azure. We've got a really, really great session that we're doing in partnership with Janet Shine's company about social media marketing, and just very hands-on specific. You will go home knowing exactly what to do, at least to get yourself started with. It's not a theoretical discussion. So great stuff. If you are anywhere near Dallas, we still got room to get you in there. You want to go to events.channelpronetwork.com to register. And by the way, all of that amazing content I just described to you is going to be presented at our remaining three. We have 3 more events after next week that we're doing face-to-face. There's one in Charlotte, North Carolina. There's one in the Washington, D.C. area, and one in Los Angeles in Southern California. And you can get all the details and the dates and sign up for those too at events.channelpronetwork.com.
Yep, and I'll give folks a shortcut in order to get right to that registration page. So if you're listening, go to channelproforum.com/Dallas. That will take you right to the registration page. Use promo code CPVIP when you register. That will waive any fees for you, get you in the door for free, but I guarantee you will walk out the door with a lot of value. If you're watching, we'll put a graphic up with a QR code. Scan that. It's going to take you that same URL. Make sure you use that promo code CPVIP, and you will be joining us in Dallas. Make it a point to come. And I will point out that session with Janet Shine on social media stuff is awesome. It is really, really engaging and great. So I highly encourage people to come. And of course, I also think that the dating game segment on recruitment is very, very good because I'm in it. So that's just why everyone's got to go show up just to see that. Okay, super important.
And just to see how Matt works Swedish death metal into that session. I'll just drop that hint and leave it there, but he does.
Swedish death metal and sandwich security is very important. So we'll make sure that we cover all of those topics in depth as well. So folks, make sure you're there. Dallas area, June 6th and 7th. 7th is the main day. 6th is some pre-day workshops with Dell and Trend Micro, which is really good, and a cocktail party. So make sure you're there. Don't miss it. Michael, I'm really glad to have you back. It's I know you've guested with us a few times. In fact, I think the last time you guested, I wasn't here. I think that was when I was on vacation, if I remember correctly. So I kind of missed. I got to watch that show, but I didn't get to interact with you again there. So it's great to have you on when I'm here. Yay! So go ahead and why don't you tell our audience, for those who may have missed kind of those episodes or haven't gotten back to them, or it's been a while. Tell us a little bit more about you and what you do.
Sure. So LAN Infotech is a managed service provider based in Fort Lauderdale. We've been in business for 12 years and proud to say that we're 24 employees now. So we did go through the dating game recruitment piece. So that sounds like a really cool kind of session that's out there. But, we have a strong vertical in the legal industry and the not-for-profit industry. So really like to give back and go out there and work with, I guess it's 2 ends of the coin, depending on how you look at the legal profession that's there. but I've been doing law firms for 25 years. We're unique because we are a tier 1 managed Microsoft partner. Live and breathe that. Rich, you're talking about, I might have to fly to Dallas because of all the things that you're putting out there. We have a big Azure practice, and I think that's something that's overlooked by a lot of Microsoft partners there, and it's been pretty strong for us, especially as we're moving into this new phase of work from home. So it's been really good for us.
Fantastic. So so you are in a sunny area, so you don't have to get jealous of Rich from going to Santa Fe because you live in that environment all the time. But tell you're in the intro, I mentioned customer immersion experience trainer. So you're pretty, if you got a big Azure practice and you qualify for that, what is that? What does that mean? Customer immersion experience trainer.
So it's interesting that Microsoft had this program probably for about 5-6 years. It was one of those hidden gems. In the old days, they'd actually ship you equipment that you could bring to customers and run, a hands-on type class. Obviously, the world changed a little, so now it's more of online sessions. But it was probably one of the most unique trainings that I ever went through. We were running these sessions for a few years. Microsoft gives you the full script, and I will say that the book script for each one of them is probably like 500 pages that you go through. But when they bring you out to training to become this certified person, they actually teach you to be a better trainer, a little more listener, how to work the audience, stories. I know, I keep harping, Rich, you said the cyber stories, but how to work the stories, how to work the audience, and how to get those aha moments. So twice a month, we run these customer immersion experience for prospects and clients on, Teams related pieces, Power Apps, Azure. We've got a new one coming up at the end of the month on Azure Virtual Desktop. But instead of just being lectured and shown, customers come in and they actually have a virtual machine to come into. And it's watching and leading them through, in the Azure piece, most people could barely spell Azure. So when they go in and see what some of the options are and how to create and how easy it is to create virtual machines. So that hands-on experience, whether in person or in the lab, is a great selling tool and customer retention tool.
Yeah, one of the things that we've noticed is, and why we kind of have a session about it at the shows this year, is that the uptake for Azure for SMB partners in particular is pretty low for the most part. What kind of opportunities do you see that you can tell your peers about that ways that you're using Azure to help your SMB customers?
So it all started off with backup, of course, easy, inexpensive ways to go out there. But listen, we're expecting our first tropical wave this weekend, if you could believe it, in the hurricane season. If you look at it, they're not necessarily calling it, but we're getting, I know in my town, Boca, we're going to get almost 7 inches of rain. So you add wind to that, and, was the reason we went to Azure. People need, an out of office experience to be able to go out there. So we have customers that are fully hosted, running all their applications in Azure. We excelled in the past, probably pre-pandemic and going forward, in Azure Virtual Desktop. People taking that full experience and putting up into the cloud. And then, people that need high performance, 1 month you might need X number of CPUs, and then the next month you might need less. So we've been able to scale that. And then with the advent of Windows 365, the ability to just have an inexpensive desktop in the cloud, just for the whole new work from home strategy. Because, hardware has been a big boom for us in the past 6 months, and people are realizing that, work from home, or, or whatever we're calling it these days, you have to have a good strategy in place. So Azure's giving us that ability to have that true roaming desktop. So you're at home, you're still connecting to the same desktop. I don't have to worry about what the home hardware might be. For those firms that were not giving out equipment, I can centralize that. And for us, we actually have 2 full-time employees that work for us in Kingston. For us to secure things in place there, we're all in the cloud. We use it. I think it's something to look into, and it's one of those growing technologies.
Very interesting. And so tell me this: of all the verticals you picked, what is it like working with lawyers every day? Do you just go home like feeling a little dirty every day?
You know what? I love it. And I love comments like that because, I could be at a ChannelPro event or anywhere else, and you bring up the vertical and you see everyone turn their nose up and go out there. Listen, like any other vertical, you have to understand the industry. One could say the same thing about certain areas in the medical industry. Why would you want to work with that doctor? Would you shake hands with them? Go out there. So I think I started in law firms 30 plus years ago and understood how it worked. And I realized that, to become a specialist, you had to understand their industry. So in reality, unlike, similar, I'll say, to many of our listeners, time's money, and lawyers work on that. If you're providing services to them, you're happy. If you're needing their services, maybe, you turn your nose up a little because they're just like us, billing for everything. So, very data intensive. They're not really, they don't really have to worry. They do worry about security, but they're not validated against any organizations. They have ethics laws. So listen, chewing up a ton of data, appreciate the faster machine. And I always say, if I can save them 5 seconds in an hour, that adds up to all those billable time. So always looking to exchange, and upgrade technology. And like any field, there's the good ones and the bad ones, the ones that spend money and the ones that don't. So in reality, our job is to pick those ones that really appreciate us and appreciate technology.
Is that how they bill? Is it dollars per second for lawyers these days?
Listen, it's like anyone else. You only got so much time in the day that you can bill for as all of our expenses are going up. So yeah, I would assume so.
And hey, you know what? I wouldn't worry about shaking hands with doctors. Like they wash their hands a lot, from what I understand. So
it's the thought sometimes.
Yeah, true. Like, where is that hand, Ben? I don't want to think about that. I swear. Well, anyway, awesome having you here. I'm sure we're going to learn a little bit more about you as we go through the show, and we talk about stuff. Well, of course, maybe a little bit of fun at the end. But we got a really cool show, actually kind of a unique show this week that we'll talk about. So first, we're talking about some news. Kaspersky's in the news. We're going to talk about Johnson Controls very briefly. We got a couple stories that we're going to talk about. One about Ingram Micro. We're going to take a peek at the hardware market. I'm looking forward to talking about that one because I always like to talk about hardware. But we have a kind of a unique interview segment this week because it's not quite an interview, but it's something a little bit different. Rich, do you want to kind of explain what that is?
You know what? This is something that I have been wanting to do literally for years. So I live in Seattle. I am a semi-regular listener to a sports radio station out here. And, the San Francisco 49ers are our big rivals in the NFL. And so the first time the Seahawks play the Niners every year, this radio station in Seattle gets on the air live simultaneously with a sports radio station in San Francisco, and they have fun and kind of trash talk each other and so on. But basically, it's one conversation that shows up in two entirely different broadcasts. And I thought to myself, we have conversations all the time here on ChannelPro Weekly. Wouldn't it be fun if we partnered with some other podcast? We had one conversation together, and then we kind of embedded it into two different shows. And we finally got a taker. We got somebody who appreciated the vision and agreed to play along with us. And you will hear the results later in the show. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, there's no secret. We can go ahead and say who it is. I think it's something to look forward to. But we paired up with Rick Jordan, Reach Out Technologies, and his podcast of All In. So I know that's syndicated in a lot of different countries around the world, and it's got quite a few viewers there. So it's gonna be it's fun. We recorded that. It was a couple days ago, I think.
Yeah, it was right after the holiday weekend. No trash talking, folks, but it is fun.
Yeah, no trash talking, but it is a great conversation and it's really interesting. And I really appreciate Rick and his team for sitting down and doing that with us. And hopefully we'll have some more collaborative projects with Rick and with other shows down the road. So something to look forward to. So we got that coming up. But Rich, why don't we go ahead and dive in? Kaspersky has enhanced something. What did they enhance?
And, I'm going to preface this briefly by saying the Memorial Day week show is always a tricky one for me because, first of all, normally we record on like day 4 of the work week. Now it's day 3. So there's less time for news to break. And then vendors tend not to break news this week. So this tends to be a lighter news week, which makes it a little bit harder to pull information together. But we did get some news. It's not earth-shattering news, but some news from Kaspersky that ties into, I think, some larger trends that we've spoken about in the podcast before. So what they did this week was ship an updated edition of a product of theirs called their Threat Intelligence Portal. It's basically a tool that pulls together threat intelligence from a variety of sources. In the past, those sources were all Kaspersky sources. They have a whole bunch of different threat feeds that they maintain. One of the probably the most significant thing about this new release is now they are pulling in information from third-party sources as well. And so that can include other security vendors. That does include open source threat intelligence sources. And they've also, they're tying into security-related websites and news feeds and so on. So they are creating a more comprehensive real-time view of threat intelligence and putting that into the fabled single pane of glass for you. That's sort of the design idea here. One of the things that's also all new in the new release, they have a dark web search feature, which allows you to search for information about vulnerabilities, planned attacks, successful breaches that are being discussed, have been discussed on the dark web, which is interesting. I alluded before to the fact that they're pulling in information from news feeds and blogs and so on that talk about security. They have a surface web, as they call it, surface web search, that allows you to look across those sources. So if you hear something about the Exchange server vulnerability du jour, and you want a quick way to learn about it, you can use the surface web search feature to find what's inside the tool. And then they have something new they've added called the research graph, which basically just graphically, kind of visually represents the information that they're pulling in from all of these different sources and kind of helps make the connections between them and how they fit together a little bit easier for analysis purposes. So this is a pretty sophisticated tool. It's probably going to be channel pros who are MSSPs. If you have like a hardcore security practice, you have analysts or do some threat analysis of your own, this is something that you might want to take a look at. I think if you are outsourcing SOC services, for example, this might be more firepower than you need, but it feeds into two, or we'll call it two different closely related trends that come up in security a lot right now. And one of those is just that vendors are increasingly aware of the fact and acting on the fact that more information from more sources in one place makes everybody smarter about the threat landscape and how to react to it. And so we've spoken in the past, in fact, the very first announcement of this was about a year ago. Sophos introduced something that they call the Adaptive Cybersecurity Ecosystem, which was specifically designed basically to allow them to pull information in from security solutions offered by other companies, put that into their threat intelligence data lake, and then allow those vendors to pull information out of the Sophos data lake as well. But you know, a basic idea is we're going to stop sort of policing these borders between our products and other people's products. Let's pool our information and make ourselves and our customers and all the MSPs out there a little bit smarter about what's happening out there. And that is related, so that the same basic principle really explains why extended detection and response, XDR, is such a hot market in security right now. Because again, the idea is you can do detection and response better if you are getting input not just from the endpoint. We're all familiar with EDR, endpoint detection and response. If you start collecting information from the firewall and the email security system and all these other security systems, pull it into one place, collate it, correlate it there so you can see trends that you might miss otherwise, you're going to be smarter and more effective. So basically, Kaspersky is sort of the latest company to get on that bandwagon there and really try to pull more information into one place from more sources, not just their own, in their threat intelligence portal.
Like somebody was at Kaspersky and they were watching like old PBS specials and it said, "The more you know," flashed on the screen, and you know they modeled their whole thing after that. More knowledge is more better. That makes sense.
Absolutely.
Right? Michael, do you disagree with that?
I always say knowledge is power. You know, I think a lot of people have coined that piece. So the more knowledge we have, the more powerful we could be on that side of it. But you're right. You know, if the old, you know, we've probably been saying for 20 plus years, single pane of glass. So it's good that they have something like this that feeds the other people's information in there. I think we all need as much as we can possibly get.
Yeah, it sounds like a pretty advanced tool. I will pose a philosophical question though, because I really am kind of curious with this, Michael. Yeah, and I'm going to pose this to you. When is the dark? If we're searching the dark web, if we're indexing the dark web, if we're pulling results from the dark web, when is the dark web really not the dark web anymore?
You know, it is kind of interesting because, you know, when we talk to customers, you know, all of them prospects, they're like looking at us like we're blue in the face, you know, and some of the things that we find on there, you know, are older things, you know, so I think it, you know, we need something that goes deeper into the dark web, not just scratches the surface. Because I think we always hear about, you know, all these things that start off in the dark web, but we never get to see it until, you know, something happens. So you're right, you know, everybody talks about it, everybody scratches the surface, but we need someone to prove to us that they're penetrating a little further.
Yeah, you got to get in, you got to get beyond, because even the dark web has a surface layer that's visible, but then, you know, like the internet or, you know, the
Right.
open web, there's a big layer that's not immediately visible to the public world. So
We all know our email's been breached. I mean, you know, on all the other places that are out there, because that's what a lot of the basic products scrape across. So what? That email was, you know, breached in this, you know, in one of thousands of other apps. You need a little more information and possibly where it came from.
right, for sure. So it looks like a good tool. So is this something you have to subscribe to separately, Rich? How would people get access to this tool if they want this kind of level of information?
Yeah, this is offered as a product. It's part of the Kaspersky portfolio product family. So yeah, you would subscribe specifically to this.
Cool. All right. Well, let's hope it makes the world smarter and people safer. And we'll move along from there. Next story is about Johnson Controls, and they've appointed. We're talking about an appointment. We don't normally talk too many of these stories about people getting hired and stuff, but this sounds like it might be a big deal. So tell us about Rodney Clark. This is where this was the Microsoft guy. That's right.
Exactly.
I was wondering why we were talking about this, is because there was a bet on where he was going to end up.
And I guarantee, so yeah, 2 weeks ago, the last time I was on this show, it was breaking news. It had just broken within 48 hours that Rodney Clark, the worldwide channel chief at Microsoft, was leaving Microsoft, and what they announced at Microsoft, he's going to a very good Microsoft partner, and he's going to be in a very senior executive role at that company, but they didn't say what the company was. So, you know, I won't say Matt and Frank Bravata, our guest hosts, were sort of speculating, placing bets where that would be. I refused because it felt so random to me, like, who knows where he winds up? And I will just say, now that we know, who did anybody even go anywhere near Johnson Controls? But that is, in fact, where Rodney Clark is going. He is going to be a vice president and chief commercial officer there. If you think about it, and I'm familiar with Rodney's background, this makes a lot of sense. Before he began running the Microsoft Partner Program, he spent quite a number of years at Microsoft, sort of in charge of partner activity in their Internet of Things business. So he's very familiar with the IoT business, has great relationships there. That's kind of where Johnson Controls plays. They are more on the operational technology, the OT side of things, as opposed to IT and very much an IoT company. So from their perspective, you can definitely see how bringing on board somebody with a lot of experience at Microsoft and a lot of IoT experience made a bunch of sense. So we have resolved that mystery. Where is he going? What's he going to do? We now know. Michael, I'm going to kind of use this as an opportunity because we spoke about this a little bit 2 episodes ago on the show. And in fact, I had additional conversations about this with attendees at the Ingram Micro Cloud Summit, which is where I was 2 weeks ago when we last did an episode that I was on. And I was a little surprised, actually. So almost nobody I ran into at the show was aware of the fact that Rodney Clark was leaving. When I mentioned to them that this story had broken, I was a little bit surprised the degree to which I got these kind of good riddance reactions. a little joking, but I mean, basically nobody was sort of sorry to see him go because, as you know, and as everyone in the audience knows, Rodney leaves behind two very, very significant changes in the Microsoft partner landscape. And one is the rollout of the new commerce experience and that whole change to cloud licensing and so on. You actually, Michael, were quoted in an article we did about that in our magazine not long ago. Very disruptive, time-consuming, I will say, for most of the partners that I spoke with at that show 2 weeks ago, transitioning their customers over. And then the other thing, more recently announced, is that there is this enormous change, a shakeup of the Microsoft Partner Program coming in October. Everything from the designations that you can qualify for and the specializations and how you do that, the name of the partner program, everything is going to change. So you mentioned before, I mean, you know, tier one, very strong relationship with Microsoft and place in the partner program. I'm just going to open it up to you here. What are your thoughts about Rodney Clark and his tenure? What are your thoughts about new commerce experience? And what are your thoughts about the changes coming to the partner program?
Well, first, I would say that I was surprised when we heard that Rodney was leaving, because he was just at the top of that mountain of getting beaten at that point, almost over the hump. You know, I got an opportunity to meet with him a couple of times, you know, right as NCE came to peak. And, you know, definitely was a well-versed person at that point, was definitely well prepared with the answers. But, you know, listen, you hit the nail on the head. You know, NCE really rocked all our worlds that are out there. And, you know, under the cover that you go out there, you know, NCE Part 2 takes place in September too, because not-for-profits, they can hit. They haven't changed anything in government. So, you know, we still have changes that are coming out there. And then, of course, for those of us that jumped early into the NCE program, you know, as it hits next February, we have that, you know, big problem of going back out there in whatever systems we knew and increasing prices to the customers. You know, so it's an ongoing, you know, pain and suffering. You know, I'm not sure what went on in those boardrooms, you know, with Microsoft management thinking of this and then, you know, stabbing us again with medallion changes. I was on a Microsoft event last week, you know, with the reading the riot act of, you know, when you can call yourself something new, what the badges will look like, when the badges will be out, you know, so there's a whole big piece still to come on that, you know, and many of the partners, and I'm sure plenty of listeners, even myself, still confused. You know, a month ago, I thought I made it. Now I gotta have other things to do out. What do I call myself? And Microsoft really pushing it clearly to say they want people to have big skin in the game, because it's not only, you know, getting those points that are in place there. The point system also includes, you know, new headcount, you know, new logoed sales, where before it's like they'd be happy with your, you know, annual number. Well, now you need that annual number. You need a minimum number of new customers to go out there and heavily focused in product. So it's you know, it's definitely one of those things that, you know, keep me up at night thinking about, you know, when they'll draw the line. I think we'll see more information about that when, you know, partner conference comes out virtually. I saw the first emails go out for somewhere in the second week of July. So usually they beat us up this month. You know, all the rumors start, all the change.org petitions continue to go on there, and then Microsoft kind of tells us, you know, how it'll be, you know, second week of July.
Do you think they're gonna walk back a little bit from some of the changes that they said that they're gonna make? Do you think they're gonna, you know, not have quite as much change, or do you think what they've announced is what's going to happen?
I think what they did even with NCE is they just kept extending it, and they loosened up a couple of things, not that made a difference, whether I had 3 days to cancel a license or 7 days or 10 days. It's the point that you raised prices and you screwed me into the 1 year type piece that goes out there. So I think in my mind, I think they know how far back they're going to go. They want to just see what the pushback is to get there. Maybe they'll extend it further, you know, but I don't think there's too much written out on this at this point. I think that they really want to make sure that people that are doing business with them are truly going out there and putting more skin in the game. Because listen, you know, it's not just selling, you know, a $5 license anymore or a copy of Office that's out there. You know, as we started talking in the beginning, the Azure, the security aspects of it, I think they really need to tighten up their game. I don't think it's fair to us that are in there in place. I also hear that they're filtering out, what you're doing in tier one. So I think there's more changes to come. And then lastly, I'll say the bad part for our industry is that this sets precedent for other SaaS vendors to be able to push their weight around.
For sure. Well, it's going to be interesting. That's for sure. And
it will be.
And it's good to see Rodney Clark land somewhere. Johnson Controls was my second guess. We didn't get to that on the show, but I was thinking, I think I said, HP, I was thinking, big data kind of thing, but Johnson Controls really was my second choice. So I guess I should always go with my second instinct as opposed to my first.
Well, listen, that IoT is that next frontier, right? We've been talking about it. A lot of us have been fumbling with it. It really is going to control everything.
That's a really good point. And so let's talk about IoT briefly. So what are you doing anything in IoT that would be of interest to those listening or watching?
Really security type things. I think that, we all have clients large and small that use the consumer-based products that are out there, right? Thermostat, alarm, little devices that are out there. I think, a lot of the companies are looking at the cyber issues with those and the support issues with those, and starting to realize that they need more commercial type product versus the home type product that's out there. So we're just dabbling in it for that. We see that, but we definitely see in some of the events and articles that I read that go out there on the manufacturing side of it, how it really changes it. So, Johnson's always been a leader in that. And I think people have to get away from the I don't want to mention the bad brands, I use them, but the consumer brands, and realize that that's a reason that you have a consumer product that, maybe you'll stay on hold for 4 hours to get something working. But, when it's controlling an air conditioning system in a 50,000 square foot warehouse, you can't afford to have downtime.
Very true. Absolutely true. Well, interesting stuff. And good luck to Mr. Rodney Clark in his new ventures with Johnson Controls. And we hope he does well. So good job to that. And kudos to me for almost getting it right. And that's a complete lie, folks. But I'm just going to run with that anyway. So that's going to roll or wrap what we have for the news this week. But Rich, we do got a couple other stories that we want to talk about. One is about Ingram Micro. What's this one about?
Yeah, and I'll basically, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on the Ingram Micro piece of this, but I want to use this as a way to set up another conversation where I'm curious to get Michael's input. Because after we recorded that episode of the podcast where I was at the Ingram Micro Cloud Summit 2 weeks ago, I wrote and posted one last story from that event. And it had to do with something that was kind of interesting to me. So, speaking time on the main stage in a general session, it's always very limited. Victor Baez, the Senior Vice President of Cloud Channel Sales at Ingram, he may have had 20 minutes on stage on the first day of that event to speak. And he dedicated some of that time to a particular issue that just kind of caught my attention, which was the idea of cloud vendors going direct. And he, in fact, said, I quote him in this article I wrote, "We're quite comfortable in referring to direct, non-channel, go-to-market routes as potentially our largest competitor." He said, and that goes for Ingram. Obviously, if you are an end user buying direct from the vendor, there's no distributor in that loop. It goes for all of the distributors' partners, too, if that direct transaction is taking place. Now, Victor brought this up to essentially swat it down and say that this may be the biggest competitive issue we run into, but it's not something that Ingram is losing sleep over, because the product alone is, and a product alone is not going to get the job done for the customer. A typical cloud solution is going to involve multiple products, including some hardware typically. Those products are going to come from multiple vendors, and you're going to need a partner, and the partner is going to need a distributor to kind of figure out what combination of products is going to work best and how to fit those together and really fill that trusted advisor role. There's a lot of complexity that a vendor you're buying from direct in cloud can't handle for you. And there was an interesting statistic that he cited, basically. And I will quote this from the article too. IDC, he said, projects that the indirect channel sale of software as a service and platform as a service revenue will increase from the low 30% to almost 40% between 2019 and 2024. So as he put it, the indirect channel, that's our readers, channel pros, are gaining share against the direct go-to-market route, which appears to validate the argument that Ingram was making. So it was interesting to me that they said this isn't something that we're worried about, but they also dedicated some stage time to this issue. It must be something that they hear about from their partners and felt like they wanted to address. And so to that point, I kind of wanted to bring it up, with Michael. You're big in cloud. You're big with Microsoft in the cloud. There is that anxiety. I hear it sometimes from partners about end users taking that relationship direct and what that could mean for the cloud service providers out there. To what extent is that on your mind, and what do you kind of think about Ingram's take on that issue?
So I think Ingram definitely hit the nail on the head there, that they're always going to need people, your audience and us, to go out there and do it. I always equate things to food and cars. So in the food piece, you walk in, you have this great meal at Morton's, and then you flip out on the bill, and then you realize, oh man, I can buy steak for 13 bucks a pound, but you never have that same service as well as that full recipe at home. And I think that a lot of the people, kind of do the do it yourself type piece out there, but they're the people that are first in line that are new customers for us. Because when you look at the menu, I'll just see even on Microsoft, just go Microsoft. Do I go Google? Do I go Microsoft? If I'm putting servers in the cloud, am I going AWS? Am I going Google? Am I going Azure? How many SKUs are in there? Am I putting the right thing in place there? So in reality, we do prove our value. We have seen, we are also a Dell direct partner. We're part of their partner program. And as you see, even in the new Dell, when you order something online, there's everything in the world on that cart that you can buy, all the way down to the cables, to everything. But how many end users really know what that means? So I think cyber, I always say that all roads lead back to cyber. You go out there, you say, nope, I don't need that client, I don't need this. And lo and behold, they're exposed, they have an issue, because up front, you could have bought any one of the flavor of antiviruses, but you decided not to at that point. You kind of went with the inexpensive i3 with 4 gig of RAM, and then you try to run AutoCAD. I mean, I think there's certain things that, we go out there and we try to be we definitely are price conscious, because, Amazon's out there, the refurb market's out there, all of the gray markets out there. So we really try to be price conscious and let the customer know that, listen, your time is something. When we were talking about lawyers, we're joking about time is money. For any business, time's money. Do you have the time to shop on the Dell website, then go to the HP website, the Lenovo website, and then come back to a manager and say, hey, I have all these things. Is it really apples to apples? And lastly, I'll bring up, I can't tell you how many prospects that we pick up that they want to, go to something higher security and realize that they only bought Windows Home because they bought, the big club kind of, Memorial Day special, that $300 laptop. We all know how long that'll last. So we really have to prove our value. We're out there knocking on doors. We're running events like the customer immersion experience. We're very involved in our community. And for most of the local community that we work through our chambers of commerce, we said, listen, I don't mind being that second string quarterback. If you're looking to go buy something, you go out there and you're not a customer, reach out. We'll give you an honest opinion, and we're not yes men. So if you are buying, I guess I could say, if you are buying crap, we're going to tell you you're buying crap and give you an alternative. But you have to have a realistic budget, and I'm a true believer in you get what you pay for.
It's interesting listening to you talk about that, because it reminds me of something different. I'm curious if you've had or continue to have this experience. I remember probably 2-3 years ago talking to an MSP here in the Seattle area, and that conversation was specifically about this phenomenon of like the big phone companies and the big cable companies introducing managed services businesses, very competitively priced. And this guy I was talking to had actually lost a customer, a longtime customer, to some big telco company because the pricing was so much lower. And I forget what it was, 9, 10, 12 months later, the customer came back because having eaten that, steak purchased at the grocery store, they realized it ain't the same thing as what I got at the steakhouse. And they wanted to go back to that experience of working with a partner. Are you seeing that phenomenon in the cloud world where maybe there are some companies that figure, well, I can save a bunch of money if I go direct, and then they see what they're giving up when they do that?
I definitely have, and more often than not, I'm seeing that. But if I look at my last 10 customers that came on, all SMBs, they outgrew the one-man part-time shop. I'll use not-for-profits as an example, maybe houses of worship. There's always a congregant that's helping them out. And then that guy's on vacation in Santa Fe, eating and drinking and going to art places. They can't answer the phone, and they're down. So we're seeing that, the people that are using the inexpensive one-person type shops are outgrowing that because, listen, I don't know many of my clients that, come in at 9 o'clock and they close their doors at 5 o'clock. Somebody has to be able to answer the phone, to go out there, respond to tickets, and, try doing that. And we saw the same thing in a lot of these providers. And we're seeing the same thing on internet usage. You buy broadband today, you're a home user, there's no SLA. They don't even know what SLA means. All they complain about is the provider, I'm on hold for 4 hours, they could care less. Well, when you spend more and you have a responsible company that will answer the phone or have providing some standard level of agreement to go out there, the first time someone gets back to them at 8, 9 at night, depending on the operation, they don't care what the money is. They're like, oh my God, thank God someone called back. So I think it's important that we always have to prove our value that's out there. And you're going to have those guys that never had a problem, walked into a Costco, a Sam's Club, bought a dozen machines. They're working great for 3 years, never had a cyber experience, don't feel a need for a professional services company to help them out. But I think that's not the norm.
I don't think that's the norm. I don't think it's going to be the norm going forward, even if someone was kind of lucky. But I also see one thing that's on the side of partners for SMBs and distributors is that the more and more tools you need in order to protect yourself or use or manage a business, that becomes overwhelming for an SMB very quickly to just to subscribe and manage all of that stuff on their own. Partners are far more equipped to deal with that kind of stuff, and I think the customer just wants one bill to pay. You know what I mean? And
we also need a distributor relationship. I mean, Rich and I were together at the Eaton Partner Conference. I in some of my rooms, how many distributor reps were there just to learn like we learned, right? That are out there. So they're investing the body count in something that maybe us as a managed service provider don't have the expertise in. So you have to have that distributor relationship that's there to be able to go out and try to configure something. I learned a lot there, and now, we're selling some things that we left on the table, but then I need help the first few times to figure out, what's the right cable, oh, this is a different model for me. It's all that stuff that we're kind of leaving on the table that the distributors help. And also with what we're going through with, just this whole, chip shortage, all the shortages that were going out. We need multiple distributor relationships to be at least honest with us as to, what you have in stock and how soon am I really going to get it. I tell the distributors, I just need a realistic number. I know that things change, but that way I can go back to the client and say, listen, we have to go to a different manufacturer because, these devices are back ordered for 4 months.
Right. Yeah. Don't tell me it's coming next week when it's not coming for an entire quarter. Right. That always makes sense. Are you finding the distributors being honest with you throughout this, or are they being a little less so?
No, I think they're very upfront, and a lot of them, listen, I try to talk to them as little as possible. I want to do it all online because I'm not doing my quotes sometimes during business hours. So, we always say, listen, if you see 3 of them in stock, it's like going anywhere else. It's not it's not out there, but a majority of them invested time into that front end for us to go out there. And I could realistically see that, hey, our ETA is something like this. So as you're shopping for product, whether it's, let's just talk, the commodities, desks, laptops, you can buy a laptop, but I can't get a docking station. So now I got to go a third-party dock. I got to see what's on there. So they are keeping inventories pretty up to date so that you could see it. And listen, just a line that says out of stock does me no good.
Right, for sure. Well, interesting. Yeah, good story, Rich. And we'll just where are we falling on this? Do we think that he's right, that it's going to be a big point of competition down the road, or do we kind of think that that's not really going to be a big competitor for the channel?
I mean, personally, I'm with Ingram and I'm with Michael on this. I mean, I think the logic that Ingram presented from the stage makes a lot of sense. There are, it is cheaper to go direct, but it really isn't going to be an adequate answer to the customer's needs in a lot of cases. So the fact that Ingram, dedicated some time to this suggests that there is anxiety about it out there. But I think from a long-term perspective, this is probably not something that's going to be a huge problem either for the distributors or their partners.
Okay, well, we will keep an eye on that, and we will see how things change over time. Rich, I'm excited about the next part that we're going to talk about, because we got one more thing we're going to discuss real quick, and that is the hardware market. So we got, are we going to post all these links, or are we going to kind of wrap this up into some other kind of article?
Well, I will go ahead. I will not be writing an article that pulls this together, so I'll go ahead and include these links in the show notes for this episode. And basically, what I'm going to do here is kind of run you through some statistics, most of which actually just popped up this week. There are a few that are just a little bit older than that, but 4 different press releases or announcements that I've seen within the last week, for the most part, that really gave or provide an interesting little glimpse into where the hardware market is right now. And as just to set that up a little bit, I mean, one of the reasons that we continue to watch the hardware market is because hardware sales just exploded in the spring of 2020, when all of a sudden people are working from home and everybody needed laptops and peripherals and so on as well. But the enormous sales volume, particularly of notebooks. Last year, as people start going back to the office, desktop sales start picking up. And there was a real question in my mind and the mind of a lot of experts in the industry: how long can this be sustained, basically? And there were expectations that, in the second half of last year, we were going to really see it slow down. It hasn't happened, to the degree I think that a lot of people were expecting it to. So first off, Canalys, which is an analyst organization, they posted some worldwide PC numbers this week. They said worldwide PC revenue in Q1, and that's the most recent quarter for which they have complete data. And so in the first quarter of 2022, PC revenue worldwide up over 15%. Now, shipments were down 3%, and this is consistent with things I've been hearing from some of the hardware manufacturers, that the market is slowing down, but it's still obviously very healthy at 15% revenue growth. Interestingly enough, Canalys also said notebook shipments were down 6% in Q1. Desktop numbers were up 13%. So I think you are definitely seeing that trend as offices reopen, as people go back to the office and are reintroduced to that now ancient desktop that they left behind in 2022. You're seeing some desktop refresh happening, and that's a big piece of what's happening in the PC market. From IDC, and this was just yesterday, as we record this data came out. They posted the latest update of what they call the hard copy peripherals market. Hard copy peripherals is a confusing way of just saying printers. What they're talking about is printers, not so much every time I hear peripherals in that name, I'm thinking they must be talking about the ink, but no, they're just talking about the printer market. And printer shipments fell 12.3 year over year in the first quarter of 2022. So PC market maybe slowing down, but very healthy. Printer market down by double digits in the first quarter of this year. And so now I am going to turn to some data from two big hardware companies that kind of bear out some of these trends we're talking about here. So most recently, HP announced its latest quarterly numbers. And they're in the second quarter of their fiscal year, most recent complete fiscal quarter, overall revenue was up 3.9%. But if you start breaking that down, they're because HP primarily they're in two markets, right? They do PCs and they do printers. If you look at their PC business, what they call their personal systems business, that was up 9% year over year in the quarter. The commercial market for PCs in particular was up 18%. The consumer market was down 6%, and that's consistent with what other hardware manufacturers and analysts are talking about. The slowing is happening most in the consumer segment. The commercial segment is actually pretty healthy, 18% year-over-year growth in the quarter for HP. What about their printer business? Down 7% year-over-year in the quarter. And so you kind of add that up, it's looking good in commercial PCs, looking a little bit weaker elsewhere. That's where you get the 3.9% growth, which is a much smaller number than Dell reported not too much long before, maybe 2-3 weeks ago in their most recent quarter, where they announced 16% overall revenue growth. Now, not an apples to apples comparison, because Dell does PCs, but they also do back office infrastructure, which HP doesn't. But they had 16% growth, very healthy hardware growth, obviously, for them. And in PCs, particularly what they call their client solutions group, you saw 17% year-over-year growth in that most recent quarter, and it was particularly in the commercial PC segment. So you add all this up, and you're getting a picture of where things are in hardware right now. The hardware, particularly PCs to businesses, still selling after all this time, still selling pretty well. Slowing down, but there's still a lot of demand out there. Some of that has to do with reopening offices. Maybe not surprisingly, though, the printer market, which took a hit when people were working from home, is definitely dealing with some headwinds right now.
So, Michael, what is that? What you're seeing as well when you're putting together solutions? Are you still doing a lot of desktops, a lot of laptops?
We are definitely doing a ton of desktops and laptops. We probably sold more this year than we did in the past 3 years. So that was, just in the first 5 months. Printers, I kind of sit there and say, if you're buying a big commercial grade printer, those things last for years. So when they came back to the office, they just did a little maintenance, threw some ink in there, and everything worked great. So, but listen, I could see the consumer market going down because I think a lot of people jumped and bought those home PCs, right at the beginning or during the pandemic, because companies didn't know what they were going to do. And, we're doing a lot of refreshes in office. They come back. We've seen more laptops on our side because I think that for us, and I'll just speak, for South Florida that's out there, they rather spend a little more, put a laptop docking solution in place that can be mobile and be taken elsewhere and gone into that. We definitely seen that, hey, if Joe's working at home, it's about time to give him a home, give him a refresh so that he can be, up to date working at home up there, because we're seeing people being more flexible. But, we're seeing, and no one's asking about the low end units for us at this point. Everything's going out the door, i7, 16 gig of RAM at a minimum. And I think that also when people had a taste of some of those consumer devices that they had at home, if they didn't have SSDs, they're like, oh my God, look how long this thing takes to start up. So it's that whole refresh, because customers call up, it costs us more to just stick a new SSD in there, reload the OS, start from scratch, than going out there and buying a new machine. And you're right, you might have had a year and a half, almost 2 years of not using that office unit. You might have bought that 3 years before you're at that cycle. I think people are realizing that they have to have better infrastructure that's there. We are seeing a growth in some of our server markets. We'll say cloud or hardware refresh on that side of it, infrastructure refresh on switches, and a lot more wireless going out there. New Wi-Fi 6. Again, we're retrofitting that they might have had really. I'll use me as an example. I have a gigabit at home. If I went back to the office, it'd be a little slow. I just upgraded a bunch of our stuff to, Wi-Fi 6 units, and it's night and day. So I think time's money, knowledge is power, circling all these things together and seeing that they realize that they got to put something in now that's going to last them through the next few years, because we all don't know what the next 6 months will bring.
Is a lot of the new hiring, because a lot of people are expanding workforces and they're doing a lot of hiring, is that also contributing to keeping a lot of the shipment numbers kind of up?
Definitely. We hear, listen, we all hear about how bad the job market is, but in some industries, people are coming in by the handful. We have a bunch of hospitality that are out there that they have to compete with the newer, hotels and resorts that are out there. Real estate, construction's big everywhere. And some of our companies are in that. So they're, retrofitting remote offices to watch these new construction projects that are out there. We see a lot of ads in our Office 365. I was just this morning, closing out May, and I couldn't believe the number of licenses that were added in that were there. So I think it's a combination of everything, and everything's speed. Like I said, we want to do it faster. Maybe we don't have enough time to go out there, and realizing that, 3-4 years ago, they're like, I got another 2 years left on it. No, you see all this stuff that's out there, and you want it thinner, you want it faster. And also people are starting to go back to that travel world. You see people in those industries that are all over the place. They need to connect. They need something mobile. They can't drag around that luggable anymore.
For sure. So we'll end talking about the hardware market with predictions. So Michael, you're in the trenches. You kind of see what's going on right now. Where do you predict the hardware market will be a year from now?
I think we're going to see similar, if not higher, numbers that are out there. At some point, something has to give. We have to replace those jobs that are out there. And I think that most small, medium businesses said, all right, I lost 10. I'm going to use those old machines to go out there. Now I hired 15. I got to replace it. I got to keep up with it. Because as much as we talk about the cloud, we still need a secure, fast device to get to the cloud. So I think that we're going to see growth across the board. I don't see any hope on the printer market for a while that's out there, because I think also, I'm talking to you from a 40-inch screen. I got a 40-inch unit and my other one's a 36. I don't want to print. I want to look at it on the screen.
Very, very cool. All right. Well, good stuff. And that's kind of all the stories that we had to talk about for today, but we're going to change gears and we're going to go into kind of what we were talking about earlier. So we got together with Rick Jordan from Reach Out Technologies, and he has a podcast that's very popular called the All In podcast with Rick Jordan. And we decided to kind of do a special joint collaboration. So it's not really an interview. Rich, how would you describe it?
I would describe it as a conversation. Rick is a very successful MSP. He is probably the first, probably the only MSP out there who did an IPO, and is a publicly traded company right now. So I'm just a very savvy business person. So he has an interesting take on the market, and we kind of get into that take with him. And then he had questions for us, and we had an interesting conversation with him just about how the IT world has been dealing with pandemic times and a whole bunch of other things. It was just an interesting, fun, freewheeling conversation with somebody who has a really smart kind of take on a lot of different things related to IT.
Oh, awesome.
And being in business.
Yeah, awesome. I agree. And so without further ado, we're going to go ahead and switch to that after the break. And I hope everyone enjoys it. We'll see you with Michael Goldstein in part 3 on the other side.
What's shaking? Welcome back. I'm your host, Rick Jordan, and today we're going all in. Today's an interesting day because we're doing a cross post with an amazing podcast that's in my industry. Today I'm bringing on ChannelPro's Matt Whitlock and Rich Freeman. What's shaking, guys?
How are you, Rick? Good to see you.
Good to see you too. It's great to be on your show too.
Yeah, it's great to have you on our program as well. I think with this whole kind of cross collaboration show that we're doing. Why don't we take a couple minutes and just kind of introduce each other to each other's audiences?
Yeah, that's cool, guys. I love that because our audiences are similar yet different.
In all the ways that matter, I hope.
For sure. Yeah, right on.
So, Rick, why don't you go ahead and go first? Why don't you tell the ChannelPro Weekly audience a little bit about you?
Yeah, so I am an MSP, the first and only publicly traded managed service provider within our space. And there's 143,000 of us across the United States. Everyone on my show knows this already. We've been talking about this for the last several months as we got to the point of our public offering. And there was a lot of interesting media attention a couple years ago. I'm sure you guys covered it when data went public, right? And I know you've covered Reach Out a little bit as well, but here's the difference. It's like this wasn't an exit for me or anything. It's like this is a mode of building now because it's a roll-up of managed service providers, of MSPs, that's going to take place over the next 2 years, where we're acquiring about 50 million in top-line revenue is just phase one, or around 50 to 75 plus managed service providers. And still to this day, I'm the CEO. So this isn't, something like where I've sold and moved on, which we see a lot in our space, right? And they become coaches, the sellers become coaches and all these other things that I see. I'm still doing it. And I love helping MSPs just make more income because even out of 50, there's 143,000. I'm only going to acquire around 50 to 75 over the next 2 years. Yeah, but in that, I just want to help everybody else along the way, guys, whether that's happiness, cars, whatever it is, build a family, just to acquire more joy in what they have. Because I know what this is like going from being broke and nothing, starting an MSP to where I'm at right now. And I'll leave this with a question. Did you know still that the average managed service provider only takes home about $80,000 a year in personal income? Isn't that kind of crazy?
It is absolutely. And it kind of, it speaks to the fact that folks in our audience at ChannelPro definitely need the kind of expertise that we pass along from people like you, because there really is no reason why even a relatively small MSP, the owner of that company, shouldn't be doing better than that. And so for the benefit of your audience, I'll go ahead and introduce them to ChannelPro. So we are a publication 100% dedicated to IT providers and MSPs who serve small and mid-sized businesses. We went into business in 2007, which, if you think back to what was happening in the economy at the time, was maybe not the perfect time to launch a business. And yet here we are in 2022, bigger and better than ever. We have a website, channelpronetwork.com. We do events in person and online, and you've been a part of some of those, Rick, even just within the last few weeks. So we really like to think of ourselves as the voice of the SMB-oriented channel, and ChannelPro Weekly, which is the podcast that we are co-broadcasting with right now, is a show that Matt and I host every week, and we discuss any and all things related to running an IT business, from sales and marketing to new products, new solution opportunities, new tools, new technologies, et cetera.
That's awesome. Rich, thanks, my man. Matt, I know that you and I always enjoy hanging out in the back right before I go on stage, right, at the ChannelPro events.
Well, so I've taken at our events, I've taken on a little bit more of a production role these days, although you'll catch me on stage every now and then doing stuff. So I'm part of one of our sessions in Dallas. But the rest of the time, I'm ChannelPro's online director. I kind of manage our online infrastructure. I handle a lot of our web stuff. I handle tech editorial, so I'm part of the editorial team. I don't get to write quite as much as I used to, but you'll see my name in the magazine every now and then talking about technology and generally hardware kind of focus.
So we just saw each other, about a month and a half ago, right? And it was in Chicago, in my own hometown. And I've got to say that I was really, really impressed because there was probably, close to 200 people that were there. There were attendees, at least from what I could gather in the room, about 20 tables of 10 people. I mean, that's easy math, right? That's 200 people. And it was incredible to see so many people in the room again. And I've been to other events like in Florida. Last year at Funnel Hacking Live, there were 3,000 people there. But generally speaking, it's been slow for our industry, from what I feel, compared to the general entrepreneurial space, which is a lot of who's listening right now. In the general entrepreneurial space, it's like these events have still continuously gone on. during the past couple of years anywhere they could. They've just moved to states that were open almost the whole time, but it's different because you guys do regional stuff, right? What's it been like the past couple of years continuously to try to engage and build a community without the ability, like Los Angeles last year, right? I remember I was going to be there, I was speaking, and I remember that one was canceled just because it was like 2 weeks prior. There was more mandates that were placed on. I think it was vaccine requirements or something during that time. I don't remember what. I just remember that you guys made the choice to go all virtual or something, or canceled entirely. But how was that, trying to maintain and engage a community when a lot of stuff was out of your control?
Yeah, it's been an exciting 2 years, and we had all of these face-to-face events scheduled for the year, and we knew right away we were almost certainly not going to be able to do any of those. And so we had to learn a ton about hosting virtual events that kind of lived up to our quality standard on the fly. And Matt played an enormous role and continues to, but he had to figure out in a really short time, like the right set of tools and technologies and the production techniques to use to deliver ChannelPro grade quality online like that. And then last year, kind of, to your point, everyone, including us, we went back by about mid-year. We started doing in-person events again.
I think it was your event. It was your event, right? It was Dallas, I think, last year was almost, in our industry anyways, it was like the first in-person one that came back out of all of the events in our space. Because I remember talking with other guys there like Rob Ray and Matt Solomon and discussing with them. I'm like, oh man, it's so good to be back, and just seeing people in the room. And I remember that there was still, it was a little skittish, right? Because there might've been about 50 people there that were present in the audience at that one. But then there was like another 250 online, so you guys pivoted extremely well that I saw. And that was just interesting to see just the excitement of everybody to be back there in person too.
Yeah, we were really early going back in 2020, knowing full well that we were going to do what was,
I commend you guys,
hybrid
for real, to jump right back into it and be the pioneers. So how's the publication doing? Because is that what started, Rich, in 2007, or was it the events that started first?
No, it was absolutely the publication that started. And, we coming out of the gate, it was just a 12 times a year magazine that was available exclusively on paper. I barely remember what the website would have looked like back in 2007. I know that it just wasn't, that wasn't core to the business. And it was a few years before we started doing events and so on, as we kind of branched out into webinars and stuff like that over time. So it was a very different model back in 2007, and it's been kind of fascinating to watch the publishing industry evolve, and then we've had to evolve along with it. We still do a monthly magazine.
I love that. I just saw friends of mine actually on the cover of that for this last quarter, Brian and Mary Hamilton, and now she's hosting events too for clients. Right. And this is amazing. She just had her first cybersecurity. I don't remember what she called it. Right. But she had, at least from the videos I saw, 75 people that were at these events. But that's the thing, is Brian and Mary had 75 prospects for business sitting in the room. And this is one of the things how this industry has changed and morphed into how you're supposed to sell nowadays too. Just like you guys lead with education at your events. Right? Because that's what it's supposed to be. The sponsors are there, and you see me go up on stage. I'm not selling when I go up on stage, right? I'm not trying to be like, hey, come to the back of the room and I'm going to see if I can acquire you. That's not it. It's like, I'm just here to help. I'm here to educate you on what the industry is doing. And I really appreciate your approach with that too. Now, just encourage some of the other sponsors to do the same. That's one of the things, because they're going to go a lot further, right? That works for you, and that's what isn't that, Rich, what the publication was set out to do originally? It was just to educate people in the channel.
Absolutely, the original, very original vision, and I was like the founding editor of the publication, and the idea was, there are all of these IT entrepreneurs out there. And, by and large, these are people who started out as a technician. They were working for somebody else. Somewhere along the line, they decided for one reason or another, I can do this at least as well as my boss can, and I want to give that a shot. And they went into business for themselves, despite the fact that almost none of them had any experience or any training, and just on the job, they're kind of learning how to sell and market and serve customers, and then eventually how to hire people and manage people and grow employees and keep the books. And I mean, just all the stuff that goes along with running a business. There was this whole population, like you were saying, 143,000 MSPs, a huge population of people figuring it out on their own day by day. And so we thought that there was definitely a place out there for a magazine that would pull together information that these people could draw on to be more effective at what they were doing. And we also had this idea from the beginning that a lot of what we could do is connect peers to peers, that in addition to, providing guidance and information from a variety of sources that we might know, one of the best things that we could do is connect peers to one another so that they could ask questions of one another. The people, like you mentioned, Brian and Mary were recently on the cover of the magazine. The people on the cover of the magazine every month are folks who are sharing some experience, some best practice that helped them be more successful with other people like them so that they can apply it in their business as well. And that from the get-go has been the idea here is how do we help this community be more successful, and how do we help them help each other be more successful?
And that's how sales is these days. Even within the MSP space, but even beyond, is just having these sort of micro events to where you can educate people and you invite them for free, but this becomes your marketing expense, right? The invitations, and then also I don't even think they had sponsors when they did this. I know I don't when we do this, but you just feed people, right? You provide them a lunch or whatever it is, and they'll come out and they want to learn because it's a topic that makes sense to them.
Quite honestly, Rick, you are way, way more sophisticated than we are at ChannelPro about social media and kind of leveraging social media to spread the word and to grow the business and so on. I feel like there's an opportunity to get more sophisticated about some of these other venues so that once again, we're kind of meeting the audience where they want to meet us.
The consistency in the content is one of the biggest keys that I've found out, and even personally with the two of you, I'm assuming that was a question, right? By the way, this is, you're good with, from a social media perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to know more about how you use social media to grow your business and how that might apply to us and folks in our audience.
For sure. And we'll put this into kind of two buckets, because first, most MSPs are never going to do what I do when it comes to social media, right? If you take a look, Instagram is by far my biggest platform. I have a little over 300,000 followers, but it's gotten a lot of attention. And even when I do large media like Bloomberg, or Newsmax or Fox in Washington, D.C., or CNBC, all of these large media, global media networks that I've been on, Reuters, which is ticker news in Australia, all these places I've been on have generated so much back traffic to Reach Out's website. It's just insane. Now, we measured about a month ago, and we're at 47%. So 47% of the SEO traffic that goes to Reach Out's website is people just searching my name. And I even saw too, I don't know if they're listening, but malware bites now, because there's so much that's around those that if you type Rick Jordan cybersecurity, there's a Malwarebytes ad that comes up when you type that. So I know that malware, but this is brought to me by one of my board members. Malwarebytes is actually using my name to generate traffic to their website, which is mind blowing to me. That's the big bucket, right? And when it comes to personal brand too, it's because of this that the podcast is in so many countries, and at some point there will be, probably a B2C play when it comes to cybersecurity. That's later on down the road. But as an MSP right now, you can start with just something, because Instagram, even though that's my biggest platform, people still go there, not necessarily B2B, but they will go there and look me up, potential clients, potential acquisitions, and look at my content, because Instagram is a place where they actually get to know you as a human being. They get to see, and that's how you should see that, because it's meant to be photos of your life. If you're taking travel, whatever, I put a lot of my most heartfelt content on Instagram. But then if you shift over, I don't do much with Facebook, by the way. I'm just throwing that out there, because Facebook is almost kind of like a dying platform. It's great for families to connect, for some groups and all those things, but I would never suggest to an MSP to put a lot of money into Facebook where I would say put money into to generate leads would be LinkedIn. Because LinkedIn is just absolutely incredible. Because there's so much that you can do. I mean, I host events for MSPs on there right now. I just hosted one with IT Glue, and they were blown away because I sent from my team's efforts 250 registrants to this joint event that we had, to this virtual live event that we had, just because of the efforts that we put on LinkedIn. That's direct messages. Matt Solomon from Channel Program would know, formerly of Kaseya too, would understand this because he's super active on LinkedIn. I launched a newsletter because I've been intentionally building my connections and followings on LinkedIn over the last year and a half. A year and a half ago, I had like 400 connections on LinkedIn. I never put much effort into it. It was always Instagram and podcasts and all this. When I started putting effort into there strategically, now I'm close to 12,000, which is bigger than what most have in our industry, right? And it's targeted too, because my target isn't customers right now on LinkedIn, but my target are MSPs, because I want to help them and then maybe potentially look at some synergies for acquisitions. I don't shy away from that. But you can do so much on LinkedIn, but you have to be active. You have to have, I mean, I know this sounds like stupidity talk, right? But you have to have an updated profile pic. I can't tell you how many times people come on to the show with guests, or I'm on their shows when I guest on podcasts, like, oh my God, you look exactly like your picture. And I scratch my head. I'm like, that's a thing? Like people are photoshopping themselves and doing all this weird crap, or like a photo from 10 years ago is still their profile pic on these things. So if it's for business, do LinkedIn. But I guarantee you guys that people who you're trying to do business with as an MSP, if you're trying to gain clients from there, they're going to go to Instagram to see if you're there and see what type of a human being you are. That's where they connect with you personally, because people buy from people, not from a machine or a company.
So different content in those two different places, which is interesting. I assume it's more of a business conversation on LinkedIn and more about, letting you as a person shine through a little bit on Instagram to kind of develop some of that trustworthiness, essentially, that who you are as a human being. Yeah,
you got it.
It's gotta make it a little easier, Rick, because your brand is also you are your brand, right? So it's got to make it a little bit, I don't want to say easier, but maybe a little easier on to use platforms like Instagram, where it's generally more of about a personal kind of thing, and LinkedIn, where it's much more business, because you're kind of both.
You are, yeah. For me, it's interesting, and for me, anybody who's lacking, this will probably echo Gary Vee, and the big personal brand guys too. But as I said, 47% of the traffic that goes to Reach Out's website is people searching for me, just Googling me. And if you type in Rick Jordan in Google, I take up the whole front page. And Rick Jordan's a pretty common name. And to the point now to where there's even a Google panel of me, they just give those to you when there's enough searches for you on the right side. We're trying to get it edited. It's kind of funny because somehow someone thinks I wrote some books about parrots or macaws at some point. I didn't, and I'm not 58 years old.
I actually had some questions about blue macaws that I was going to ask you, because I know that Google said you were an expert on,
I know, right? I have to make that up. I'm apparently 58 years old too, instead of 42, according to Google. But the social links are right, on that panel that's over there. But yes, I hear what you're saying from there, but think about this for a second. If you go to LinkedIn, right, you're not necessarily connecting with a company that's there. People are still looking for real conversations. So if it's an MSP that goes out and has a sales call or any kind of phone call, even if it's in person, Zoom, whatever, with a new prospect, immediately go on and connect with that person at LinkedIn. Then the next thing you want to do is send them a direct message, because you might not, some people are nervous, to ask for a cell phone number. For me, it's easy. It's actually, when you're not nervous about it, anybody will just give it to you. I'm talking celebrities too. That's how I have good phone numbers. It's like, hey, when you connect with them like a real human, not like a fanboy or some freak, and you walk, it's like, for an MSP, I genuinely want to help you. I believe that I can help your business. Can you give me your cell phone number just so I can follow up with you next week when I have something put together for you? Notice how easy that was, how I said it. Right. And it makes it part of the natural conversation, but then immediately go and check out some of their content that they're putting up on LinkedIn, especially if it's a law firm or a CPA firm. I can almost guarantee you that they've been on this boat much longer than MSPs. This is something that's always boggled my brain a little bit too, is just the lack of content that a lot of MSPs will put out on any kind of social media, and maybe not even content, engagement. You know, one of the best things to do, and this is how I gain so many connections, is you go out and you find people that you want to connect with, look at their posts, and then like the post after you read it and send them a DM and say, hey, you know what? I really enjoyed your latest post that you had on your profile. That was really cool. Looking forward to more content from you. Just a message like that after you like their posts. Or, you know what? Go out and endorse them. Typically on LinkedIn, when you endorse somebody, they're going to endorse you back for something, because that's how LinkedIn works. You can endorse them, and there's like an automated function like, hey, can you endorse me for something too? And then it forms a connection that way. It's getting back to, it's the best possible way to do virtual handshakes that exist. And then you can dabble with some of the personal content, because you're right. If you go and looked at my LinkedIn, it's more, it's longer posts. It's more about the cybersecurity industry and MSPs as a whole. But then there is some sprinkled content that kind of cross-pollinates over from Instagram as well. Because while most will go and look for you elsewhere, not all of them do. But then they can still get little doses of who I am as a human. And they start to know, like, and trust me in that process, so that they're comfortable engaging with me through that direct message, through the DMs. And then you just ask them to join something that you're doing. This is how MSPs join my virtual events right now on LinkedIn. It's like, hey, I'm putting this on. Would this interest you? Like, coming up, it's the first Monday of every month. I've got a community call. This next one is, you know, the wrong way to raise prices and pay your employees more during inflation. Does that interest you at all? Cool. Here's the link. Go to the LinkedIn event and just hop on. Oh yes, different content rich, as you said, but it's meant to be that way. You know, because it's a different type of audience. It's a business audience that exists on LinkedIn, but there's still people. You still want to pepper in some of that personal stuff.
You know, something I'm curious about. So you went from 400 to 12,000 on LinkedIn. I mean, was that a sort of gradual process where you came across posts and people who seemed relevant, you reached out to them in the manner you were just describing there? Or are there techniques for finding and reaching out to people, you know, a little bit more quickly than that you were using to make that jump?
Yeah, I don't use bots. So there could be ways to do it quicker, but you run the risk of getting banned from those kinds of things. This is, you know, these are teams, and I have messages that are like that, you know. So at first it very much was me, you know, and then I brought a team on, but it's exactly what I told you is what's done. Is I go out there and I find individuals I want to engage with, or I find MSPs. I see some content that they're posting. I like their content, and it's not just a click and running through the motions. Like, I will legit take a look at the content and see if I like it. I'm not going to like something that I don't like, and that's important too, is being transparent in this process, not to go that way. Because you figure that if somebody's posting something that resonates with you, your stuff and your personality is probably going to resonate with them. So you want to find those like people. You can have easier conversations. It's lower hanging fruit, or it could be a warmer lead in that process. And then it just takes time. And that's the thing. It's like, you know, I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase. It's like, you know, 30 years ago was the best time to plant a tree. The second best time is today. Yeah, this does take time. I mean, to get this podcast in 50 countries, we're up to 260 something episodes published now, going 3.5 years. Yeah, I had, like 11 downloads in the very first episode, you know, compared to the 79,000 that it exists today. So it's just, it takes time to build this momentum. There's no real way to shortcut that in anything you do in building a business, with the exception of putting in more intention and more energy and focus onto that. Because wherever you place energy and focus grows.
I love what you said about staying genuine, though. People can really see through when people are being fake or going through motions and, you know, just kind of liking things randomly. Like, it's so obvious when people do that. And I think that's a key to making actually genuine, valuable connections long term, is to stay genuine and true to yourself.
For sure. Absolutely. And just like, I mean, that's a good amount of followers for LinkedIn or Instagram. I've got a lot of followers. Guys, I'm still in my DMs personally. You know, when I stand on stage and I say, hey, text me at this number, You know, it's a platform called Community, which is Gary Vee's and Ashton Kutcher's platform in order to engage with the community via text messaging, but it's still on my phone. I'm still the one that's in the text messages, that's in the DMs, on LinkedIn, on Instagram, wherever it is, because I want people to know that it's actually me. You know, there may be some time so where a team member could see that and get information back to them and be transparent about that. I have a marketing team. I have a dedicated team to LinkedIn. I have a dedicated team to Instagram. I put a lot of intention and energy and focus into these things because it's just how I chose to grow my business. But any MSP can do this. And what's more so is that every MSP should do this, at least at some level.
I mean, speak about that a little bit, because I worry that there might be some people listening or watching right now who are thinking, well, I don't have the time, you know, to invest as deeply as Rick is. And I mean, you know, for somebody who wants to begin leveraging the power of social media for business growth purposes, I mean, how much investment, how much time should they expect to have to invest in order to do this at a decent level?
If you want to do it where it's consistent, and when I say consistent, I mean a post a day, you know, which you're thinking, oh God, that's 30 a month. You know, there's a couple things about every social media platform that's important, and that has to do with consistency. So whatever you decide to do, if it's a post a day, I wouldn't suggest any less than a post every 3 days, which would be about 10 posts a month. But when you post consistently, the algorithm starts to like you more, because it knows that it can count on you to display your content to other people. It's almost like it's just waiting for you to continuously feed the machine. When you go off rhythm, even like posting too much or posting too little than what you usually do, then it kind of messes it up a little bit. Now, if it's 10 posts a month or 30 posts a month, it really only takes about a day to generate that amount of content if you're really intentional to it. I mean, for me, I mean, I'm in a studio right now, right? This is like a content producing machine. You know, it's once a month that I'll do podcasts where I have 5 or 6 guests on, and I batch them all in one day, which generates 6 hours worth of content that can generate literally about 50 clips to go into social media. But then I have a copywriter that will take little bits of those things and actually start to write some articles and things for LinkedIn for me based upon literally everything that I said. You know, so most of the phrasing and everything is mine originally to begin with. Now, while I have a team, any individual, even if it's like a one-man band MSP, you can sit down for a half a day and come up with at least 10 posts for that month. Any photos you have, because some of the best photos that resonate with me on Instagram are photos of me and my kids. You know, it's relatable, it's family, and then just write something. Like, I mean, when the shooting happened, this was a pivot on my team's part, you know, but I had the photos there already because I try to capture this stuff all the time to where it's like, man, these kids in the school were shot today. And the post that I wanted to go up was about my kids, being like, I'm holding them tighter today. You know, and it shows the human side of really who you are. And this is stuff that can go on LinkedIn, guys, and that should go on LinkedIn, because it shows you way beyond a cybersecurity professional, way beyond an IT management professional. It shows you as a human being, because I bet you most of the people we're trying to serve also have kids. You know, and then that forms a common connection. So if you put that up there on LinkedIn, it's like, man, tragic news today. Today I'm holding my kids a little tighter. Don't take life for granted. Don't take the years you have with your kids for granted, because today is the only day that you know that you have promise with them. Yeah, and it became a viral post. But it's my heart, and that's why it became a viral post.
I think some MSPs might have some worry about getting personal. What are some of how do you manage some of the risks about putting maybe too much out there where it might backfire?
And there's I walk and dance this line here and there. If you're going to get into the realm of politics, that's something you have to navigate very, very carefully. You know, like, for example, I'll go on, it was last year, I go on Newsmax and I was talking about the Instagram algorithm, actually, just like we're talking today. And it became about teenage body shaming for teenage girls. You know, and because Newsmax typically leans a little bit to the right, they start pushing me. It was Bob Sellers was the anchor, starts pushing me and telling me, well, what about big tech this, big tech that, the algorithm? Don't you think they should do something and everything? You know, and I just laughed at him. And I'm like, well, what about responsible parenting, Bob? You know, yeah, I think the algorithm has, you know, some sort of a malfunction. Actually, it's probably working the way it's supposed to, because it likes the negative emotions, and everybody, human nature is to feed on negative emotions. But if we're responsible parents and sit at our dinner tables with our kids and tell them to do these things, so I took it from a both sides approach. Politics is the only place that I would tell MSPs to be careful. Other than that, expose your life for real. And you might think like privacy, I'm a private person, all those things, but that's not, if it's a conversation you would have with somebody in person, it's a conversation that's okay to put online. I'm not talking like with your spouse behind closed doors, that kind of in person, but I'm talking with a neighbor, that you're just talking about, like I said, the shootings. Hold your kids a little tighter today, man. Don't be afraid to put that stuff out there. And if we're talking about social media and personal branding, this is the time to jump in on this, because going forward, when I talk to, this comes full circle, right? Going forward, when I talk about the right way to sell as an MSP right now is not going in person and sitting down with that individual, because that's too freaking slow, guys. It's way too freaking slow. The way that you want to do this is like Brian and Mary Hamilton did it, where you bring 75 people in a room and talk to them at the same time. Generate 15 leads out of that, which 5 of them are going to close. It's just simple math when you have your close ratios down. It's freaking phenomenal. And this is where things are going to go. So if you want to just putter along as an MSP, I'm going to be direct on this. I hope you don't mind that. And if you do, I'm sorry. Well, not sorry. But MSPs need to be out front and doing these things and evolving right now, because this is where the space is going. It's becoming hotter. And the reason I say it's becoming hotter is because there's other ways to reach people now. The old ways of just going door to door or having one meeting at a time, they're done. They're absolutely freaking done. I don't even think that in-person meetings should be your first meeting anymore, especially after these things. I started doing that years ago because I was still involved in sales, is doing Zoom meetings with people as the very first meeting, just to see if it's even worth your time. But instead of doing Zoom meetings one-on-one, what if you had like a 1 to 20 doing a virtual event? If you're nervous about public speaking, as you call it, the only nervousness is that you actually might make a freaking sale. Because your brain, your subconscious goes all the way to the end of that thinking, what do you need to do to accomplish this? It's like, well, what if I go in there and I talk to 20 people and 5 of them actually close? Holy hell, how am I going to handle that work? It's not really the fear of public speaking that MSPs will have. It's actually the fear of scalability. So when I say that the space is getting hotter, that's what MSPs are facing right now. Because if you're not larger, if you don't have the resources, if you don't have the foundation in place, you're not going to be able to handle the amount of workload that's going to come your way. We saw all the scrambling and people making bank, right, in the MSP space when the pandemic hit with all this remote work. And I saw across all these Reddit threads. I monitor Reddit. I don't really like Reddit, but I monitor it. You're like, oh yeah, I'm making more money than I have in years. This is amazing. And guess what happened 4 months later? They're back into like poverty again. And it's horrible because I feel so bad for these MSPs, but it wasn't sustainable because they couldn't handle that workload and grab onto it and keep going up because it kept going in their own pockets. I love backtracking to when I first started this and said that, hey, the very first thing that I did was invest back in my business and hired people to be able to take things off of my plate. So I wasn't the one that was answering service desk calls. I wasn't the one that was, always having to handle billing issues or whatever the thing would be when it came up, because this space is just going to continue to get hotter. Businesses, there's no shortage of them, even over the last couple of years. And I'm predicting right now that there will be 1/3 less MSPs now. So that 143,000 mark, there will be 1/3 less in 5 years because of 2 reasons. 1, for consolidation, and 2, because the smaller ones will not be able to service their customers the way they should be able to. And it's because of this stagnation that they have in themselves and this indecision to be able to change with the times, to be able to sell in different ways, to be able to go and mass market to people rather than one-on-one. Still have the one-on-one, but be 1-on-20 in person, be 1-on-75 in person. Imagine what your life could be like, not taking home $80K a year, but actually taking home $800K a year.
It's a stark difference. Talk a little, if you can, talk a little bit about the amount of consolidation that you see out there, because you're out there buying MSPs. You know that it's coming together, and in order to scale and in order to service customers, you got to be bigger. How can you what can you say to an MSP that's out there right now that's really small that might be thinking, wow, I can't really do a lot of the things that they can do. What does that person need to do? And what are you seeing out there?
Yeah, thank you for that. There's two ways to go about it. And I think 11 years ago when I started to reach out, it was a different world, guys. It was a much different world. Cybersecurity really wasn't even a thing. And
Britney Spears was still a singer.
She was, yeah, no kidding. You brought up Britney, which, by the way, she got the, whatever was her custody or whatever revoked, like about 6 months ago or something. She's a free woman again. Yay, Britney. With the consolidation in the space, and this is happening at all levels. I mean, we just saw Kaseya, put in their offer to buy Datto, which is actually interesting. I was there when Fred was talking in Boca Raton, and he was describing different things, and it emulated what's going across the board, right? Because Datto, as a whole, he goes, I'm just going to say it. We bought Datto because Datto was cheap. This was Fred when he was talking on that stage. And these are the things that I'm thinking. I'm like, dude, that's awesome. That's a lot of balls. I love who this guy is, right? Because he's just putting it out there as truth. And he's like, I don't get it because they're a public company. That means their financials are out there. You can actually go and look, and their profit is like next to nothing. They're running a single-digit EBITDA, which is why they were cheap, which is why it was good for us to go in and buy them, because now we can add efficiencies and we can scale the company even more. He's like, it was just a good match, but we bought them because they were cheap. And as I look at the space right now, I've talked about MSP owners taking home about $80K a year, right? Which, by the way, is just slightly higher than the SBA's, the Small Business Administration's average take-home pay for any small business owner that exists in the whole United States. I think it's at like $63,000 right now. It holds true in the MSP space too. It's right around that same range. Obviously it's like 78, 79,000 for MSPs. Now, what I'm seeing is very similar circumstances to Datto. And don't get me wrong, because I think Datto as a company, the technology is actually pretty great. I'll come out there and say it. We use it. It's been in use across the board. Obviously, we're acquiring MSPs that are using it too. And as a company, they're good. But you see this with MSPs also, is that their EBITDA is low. At least the smaller ones, it's really, really low because there's not a lot that's being used to reinvest back into the business. The mindset that I see smaller MSPs are just as simple as I want to pay my mortgage. And this is why, you guys, this is really what displays my heart wide open here, because I know that I'll find my 50 to 75 MSPs over the next 2 years, because it's going to be a good synergy between us. Like there's a big one that's coming up here that's going to close within the next quarter. And I'll have more to say about that in a little bit, but I'm a public company now, so there's not a lot that I can disclose publicly until it happens either. The smaller ones that I see, I'm still going to find 50 to 75. I'm not worried about that. But guys, I want the 143,000 to just make more money, to have a better quality of life. So when I see an MSP come across the board, I'm like, guys, man, you're not really worth that much as a business because your EBITDA is only 8%. You may be taking in $1 million, but no joke, you're only taking home $80,000. You've got $1 million in revenue, but why are you only making as an owner $80,000? Well, I've got all my people that I got to pay. I've got these other things. And it's like you're running inefficient. And even worse that I see is that most of the pricing is way out of whack. And this is why it's difficult to actually encourage MSPs that are under $1 million, which, by the way, is like 93% of them across the United States. I know, I was there. The first 5 years, I went from 0 to 500K in revenue. Reach out. The next 5 years went from 500K to 5 million. And that's because I had to shift how I looked at these things and shift my perspective and understand that the only way to do this is to actually provide more value. And, this is like a little trick into a little seed, I guess. This is probably going to publish after my LinkedIn training, but the only way to raise prices and to charge more is to provide more value. Who the hell cares about inflation and everything else? Don't just raise your prices just to raise your prices, and don't go back to your existing clients and saying we're bumping up prices without adding more value to it. That's like business suicide. You know, look at AT&T and Verizon right now. They're doing that, right? And then there's T-Mobile that's saying, hey, you know what? Screw those other guys. We're going to give you our top plan for the same price as the middle tier plan. We're just going to keep our prices the same and actually take it down for most everybody else. They're gaining so many more customers that way. And they're focusing on efficiencies and profitability, you know, and consolidation of their physical resources in order to increase their profits. But to do that, they're generating more cash flow in the near term by pulling all these other customers over. That's what MSPs have to do. I've done this time and time again to where I've pulled customers from other MSPs in the area, in the Chicago area, who were paying less. And now they're paying twice as much with Reach Out because I'm giving them more value. This could be adding 2 more products to your stack. This could be coming to a ChannelPro event and looking at one of the vendors and walking in and saying, hey, I'm going to add something to my stack today because I can add something and then charge more tomorrow. I can make more money and my clients can have more value and be more predictable, reliable, and secure. It's a win-win. Small MSPs are going to have a tough time because if you look at Reach Out's stack, you know, and we just went through this morning with our board of directors, they were like, oh my God. I miscounted. I used to say 27 from stage. I don't know if you remember that at ChannelPro events. I would say, hey, this is Reach Out Stack, 27 of them, whatever. We have 34, dude. 34 items, you know, with different tools and processes and platforms that are in our cybersecurity stack. And the only way to provide something like that actually does work and protects all these attack vectors from hackers is to actually charge more money. And I don't care what area of the country that you're in, you can match this to it. Because there's a training I did on pricing and there's different rule sets, but you should be at least at 70 points in gross margin on every single thing that you do. After all of your tools are paid for, after your people that go into servicing that client are paid for, even what you should pay yourself. And if you're a Lone Ranger right now, take what you would pay someone else and calculate that into your cost of goods sold and see if you're still at 70 points of margin. Most won't be because there's no MSP out there that should be charging less than $199 a seat. You know, Reach Out charges $499 a seat. Yeah, and that's literally for everything. You know, that's the cyber and the IT management. But look, we're providing 34 layers to our clients and stuff doesn't go wrong. And when it does, I think, you know, we've had clients get breached because it's not a magic wand, but when it does go wrong, the longest amount of time that we've ever taken in incident response to get them completely, fully operational again is 2 hours. That's it. And that's because we charge so much, and because we charge so much, we can deliver all these different tool sets. Because we can deliver all these different tool sets, it's actually a service that works. There
probably is no bigger, more important issue in the industry right now for MSPs than the sort of larger issue, the master issue that you're addressing there, which is just that that consolidation you were talking about is happening. So yeah, you know, there has never been more demand for managed services. That is pulling a lot of money into the market from private equity firms, from already established large companies like yours that are looking to acquire and to grow. And what that means for the smaller MSP is, like it or not, you're going to be competing with companies that can do a whole lot more than you are doing right now. And you need to, at a minimum, you need to have a strategy for competing with those companies if you intend to stay independent and small. And if you want to get bigger, then you need a plan for how to get bigger and how you're going to do that, and do that relatively rapidly. Because I don't know what the timeline looks like, but there are going to be probably fewer MSPs out there, you know, two to 3 years down the road. So this is coming at everybody in our audience, whether they like it or not, whether they're ready for it or not, and they need to have a strategy for how they're going to do that. Because it will get harder and harder to compete the old school way over time.
You got it, Rich. And I want to leave everybody on a high note too, because I mean, what we're saying is just, you know, the straight truth. Yeah, but there are ways to do this. You know, one of the ways is to maybe join up with someone like Reach Out. Now, we're the only public one, you know, that exists. Private equity, by the way, is not going to buy you if you're doing under $5 million in revenue. They just won't, because you need to have at least $1 million in EBITDA, $1 million in profit in order for private equity to actually even consider you. So if you're smaller than that, the only one that you're attractive to is somebody like me from an acquisition perspective. But if you're somebody that doesn't let and you want to go for it, there's ways to do this. And the best tip that I have for any MSP and really any business period, no joke, any business period, is to add some kind of new offering or some kind of feature or value to your services, to your products, at least 4 times a year. That's once a quarter. So as you're going to ChannelPro events and you see these vendors that are around there, scope out someone that you could add, a service that you could add to your stack, to your service, to your product that you're offering this quarter. And then you do the same thing next quarter. Now reach out. We evaluate maybe 10 or 12 a year, and that's how we got up to 34. So we've been at this. It was just like we were talking about with personal brand, right? And going from all the 400 followers to whatever it is on LinkedIn right now or Instagram and all that. It takes time. And today is the day to start that, because if you can add 4 services a year, in 3 years, you're going to have 12 services you didn't offer before. And you at least have that. And if you think you can accelerate that pace, that's cool. But you can't just try something out and then just skip it, right? 3 months later. This also means that you have to commit too. And I think some vendors are getting on board with this to where they're allowing no minimums, a very small minimum at this point. Even if they have contracts, who cares? I mean, I started this 10 years ago when all the vendors in the MSP space required long-term contracts. 3 years worth and all this stuff. But I didn't care. I think this is what I spoke on at the last ChannelPro event, right? It's like, who cares? Commit first and then take massive action. So if you see something there like, oh, you got to sign a 3-year contract and you're like, oh my God, I know this is going to provide so much value. I want to do this quarter. You have to sign up for 300 licenses minimum, whatever it is, but you only have 50 people you're servicing right now as a small MSP, who cares? That just means that over the next quarter, during your ramp-up period, you just have to sell 250. That's all, right? Think about when that's done and how much more money you're going to be making and how many more clients you have when you sell those 250, all because you made the decision now, today, in the moment, to actually commit first and then take the massive action.
Any MSP, any channel pro out there who has that kind of confidence, in themselves and in their ability to keep growing the business.
That's all I've got today, guys. You got questions?
No, that's probably a good place to wrap up. So, Rick, let's go ahead and sign off for our audience here. I'm sure you've turned some heads. I'm sure you've gotten some attention with some of the things that you said there.
People either love me or hate me, man.
Well, for those in either camp who want to reach out to you and connect with you and either yell at you or do business with you, where can they go? How can they find you?
The best place you can, for real, text me at 312-535-8520. Or you can come follow me and connect with me on LinkedIn. That's probably the best platform for MSPs. If you want to see some more fun content like there was today, that would be Instagram. But text me, LinkedIn, Instagram. Easy place to start all those is whoisrickjordan.com.
Awesome. And for those who want to check out the ChannelPro Weekly podcast or the ChannelPro Network itself, so the website's channelpronetwork.com. Go there each and every day. If you want to subscribe to the ChannelPro Weekly podcast, like Rich said earlier on, we're everywhere podcasts are. We're also on YouTube if you like to watch. It's a great show. It's got lots of good information to help keep you on top of what's going on. We have some of the most awesome interviews of any show out there, including great, awesome guests like Mr. Rick Jordan here. So come and check us out.
Awesome, guys. Thanks for being on All In, too. Have a blessed day.
Are you an MSP who is recommending Dell hardware to your end users? If so, then you'll want to check out the Dell Expert Network. The new Dell Expert Network program is a rewards and incentives program designed for service-focused MSPs who are supporting the small business market. This program is designed to deliver value and save time for MSPs who are recommending their end users to purchase Dell hardware. Currently, Dell Expert Network customers get an additional 3% back in Dell rewards when they buy Microsoft servers. Check out the Dell Expert Network today. And welcome back to part 3 of this episode of ChannelPro Weekly. Rich, what a fun and interesting experience having a conversation like that with a truly brilliant, insightful, dynamic guy like Rick Jordan. Just an absolute pleasure to do that with him. Any thoughts, takeaways?
Yeah, just we could have gone another hour as far as I'm concerned, and it would have been interesting. We didn't really get into his story in any detail, but I mean, he's had ups and downs, and the reason he kind of knows as much as he knows now and can speak as authoritatively as he can about a lot of things is he has had those ups and downs, and he's kind of figured out over time what works, and clearly it's worked enormously for him. So yeah, just a very, very interesting person, and I mean, he made the point, he emphasized it a number of times, and he really, really means it, folks. He is just super passionate about sharing what he has learned with other MSPs who are not quite as far along or as mature as he is, and he has spoken at our events. We mentioned we're going to be in Dallas at an event next week. Rick is going to be there actually, and speaking briefly at one point there. You can kind of see how much it means to him to share his take on being an MSP with other MSPs.
Yeah, 100% agree. Great conversation, really interesting. We'll put links to the All In podcast and to get more information about Rick on the show notes page for episode 227. You can find that at channelpronetwork.com, or if you're on YouTube, hit the bell, hit subscribe, there's a lot of buttons on YouTube. Just hit them all and things will happen. But if you open up the description area of the video, we're going to put links in there for you as well. Definitely a guy you want to monitor and listen to, because he knows what works. He's done it. He's living proof. That's a good, if you're gonna model after somebody, that's a good model to have. So awesome stuff. And what do you think, Rich? You want to try to do some more of those collaborative kind of conversations down the road? I think it went pretty well.
Me too. I would love to do that. And we'll look for opportunities to pull that off.
Yeah, fun. So look out for more of those, folks. That was a lot of fun, and hopefully we'll do more of that. We still got Michael Goldstein on the other side. Always a pleasure to have him with us. And I know he hasn't got a chance to watch that interview yet, but I'm sure he'll go back and check it out. So I'm not going to ask your opinion. I'm not going to ask your opinion on it because you haven't seen it yet, But actually, you know what? I am going to ask your opinion. So, Michael, what did you think about that? I'm just kidding. You haven't seen it yet. But we are going to have a little bit of fun with you. I know in the past when you've been on, we've played 5 questions, and that's always a great game, and everybody loves that one. But we've done that before, and since we kind of had a little bit of a hardware kind of discussion just before the first break, Rich came up with a really great idea that we can kind of do a kind of Hall of Fame, what's your fave kind of thing, but we'll do it with a kind of a hardware flavor. So we'll try that, and we'll see how it goes and learn a little bit more about some of your past favorite gear, which is exciting. This will be fun. So Rich, you want to go first?
Michael, what is your favorite laptop of all time?
So I will say the Lenovo X1 Carbon. I have 6 of them that go back to the original one across there. And I will just say that the reason why it's my favorite is it actually passed the cup of coffee test on there. I was flying to Chicago. I was maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes into the flight, in winter. Us Floridians usually travel in shorts. And as they were about to hand me the cup of coffee, hit the turbulence, the cup fell onto the X1 Carbon. I jumped quick enough so I didn't get my pants wet. I took that thing to the bathroom like I saw in the Lenovo show videos, washed it out, let it dry out, and the thing still lives today.
Wow, very cool. Yeah, they do a lot of testing. I got a chance to actually go to their testing center in Tokyo and kind of see how they do a lot of that testing. When they had their big 25th, I think it was a 25th anniversary thing that they did. And yeah, they put those things through the ringer, man. And it's pretty weird when you can just kind of like run a computer underwater and it still works, And
the classic chiclet keyboard touch, I'm sitting with one of them right over here. And like I said, the original's still in production in the office, so I think that, it's that Road Warrior piece. The screen's amazing. That is my favorite. And I do recommend to clients, I show them what I use.
That's awesome. Rich, you're a big Carbon guy. You've had several of those over the years.
I've had at least 3. Yeah, I went through a whole series of them. So I'm a big fan of the X1 Carbon as well.
What are you rocking now though? It's because it's not an X1. It's an HP one, right?
No, it is. This is interesting. It's a Samsung computer. I bought it about a year ago when it was like brand new. It had just come out. And I think the three of us and probably most of the people in the audience are old enough to appreciate this. This to me still feels a little bit like a minor miracle. I'm using a 15-inch Windows laptop that weighs about 2.5 pounds and has, let's call it 7-8 hours of battery life, which is just something I didn't know that I would ever see, basically, as recently as a few years ago. So, I mean, and, there are definitely some trade-offs. Like, I think a generation or two down the road in this product line, and when you see things like this from other vendors, they will be better in certain ways, like the sound and the camera aren't. I mean, they definitely had to make some trade-offs to pack, a 15-inch device into 2.5 pounds and so on. But I've been pretty happy with it, and I am brutal with laptops because of all the travel I do. And this is mil-spec 3 rated, and it's held up pretty well.
That's
awesome.
Cool. I will say that the latest X1 Carbon that I have has a built-in privacy filter. So I hit, instead of putting one of the 3M things on there, you hit a keystroke, and it's actually pretty amazing to be able to, be in your own little segmented private world. Because I'm sure, hey, you're sitting on the plane, you're looking over to the left, you're looking over to the right, it's kind of cool how far they've come.
It's a neat feature. I honestly, like every laptop that's business grade should have that, in my opinion, for sure. All right, we'll go question number 2 to me on Hardware Hall of Fame. What is your favorite phone that you've ever owned? Cell phone.
So I've owned a lot of phones, and I got to give you 2 answers. The first answer is, man, when that Motorola StarTech Flip came out, man, I felt like Captain Kirk. That thing was groundbreaking at its time that's out there. And, we think about it, oh my God, it actually was just a phone. And I got to admit that was probably cool. But the biggest piece that I got is one of the original Blackberries. When you had that capability of phone and text, or email, think about before we had, the iDevices that are out there. So I got to toss. When I was doing a security event for young professionals with Microsoft, maybe it was probably about 5-6 weeks ago, and I got into my office, and we all had one of those drawers, and I'm like, oh my God, I got an original BlackBerry. I got one of the original iPhones. I brought some of these things in to show them, and you see people's look like, what the heck's that? There's no big screen. You bring out the BlackBerry. So you look at 2 sides of the coin on that. Those were just great devices.
Very cool. Very cool. I wasn't a big BlackBerry guy back in the day. I mean, I think I had one briefly, but I was more of a Palm kind of guy, and I liked the mobile PC kind of stuff. So I had a few of those, but never a big BlackBerry person. But that's cool that I know a lot of people were back in the day for sure. So that's pretty fun. Do you still have any of those old phones, or did you get rid of them all?
I definitely have, like I said, I had a couple of them still in drawers. I also have a few of the old iPods that were out there, digging through the kids' drawers and that type of stuff. Obviously we don't have cords to turn them on anymore, but they still look kind of cool that were there. So did you say Palm, like in Palm Pilot?
Yeah. So I had Palm Pilots, and I had some like Windows, PDA kind of the Windows Mobile stuff.
Remember when that first Palm Pilot came out that had the little antenna? It was like one of the first connected ones that were out there.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember what that one was called though, because it had a name, and it's escaping me. Do you remember the Palm Treo is what those were called? The Treo. Yeah, those I remember those. That was a fun time for cell phones, because a lot of people most people were still just using like the candy bar phones or the flip phones.
Well, I will tell you that one of my first jobs, where cellular, I worked for a big law firm, and I had one of those original NEC bricks, big ones that you see out there. I wish I kept that. I think last time I was out your way, Rich, I went to Microsoft probably 4 or 5 years ago. I went to the little museum they had there, and they had the original brick that was there. that was when you were walking down the street and people looked at you like, what the heck's that guy doing?
I've had it on the show. I got one of those old, really old Motorola, ones that was like when you had the battery on it, it was like this big. Yeah, that's always fun stuff. Rich, question number 3 to you.
Well, I'm going to mix things up just a little bit because you mentioned before, Michael, you're on, I think you said a 40 or a 42-inch monitor. What is your favorite? It doesn't have to be a monitor, it could be, but what is your favorite peripheral of all time?
That's a tough question. You go back through history of what we used. So the 40-inch Dell is kind of cool. But we got big TVs. The other thing that I have here is an NEC. It's a curved widescreen. And I think when I got that curved monitor, it's really, really kind of cool. It makes you feel like you're in kind of that command center. But when you brought up the word peripheral, I'm still a track mouse kind of person. I got all those kind of devices that are there. I stuck with this for the longest time. You remember the old purple marble type thing that's there. So it's kind of a good mixture of little things out there. But I bring this one out on the plane and they're looking at me like, what? Because as much as we talk about the laptops, I don't like the little touchpad. I don't like the little piece that's there. This thing, is kind of cool because it has dual Bluetooth. So between two machines, I don't have to resync it. And I don't want to waste, as we're getting smaller on the devices, I don't want to waste the USB port. So this will connect to two, there's a 1 and a 2 button, 2 different Bluetooth devices. It's kind of cool. So something to think about if you're a multi-person there. So I look for some of that innovation. Like I said, the first time I sat in front of that curved screen, it was really kind of cool.
Very neat. Very neat. All right. You don't see a lot of trackball users around, but you still
I get the funniest looks that are out there. But think about it. Rich, you're on the long plane. You're coming from Seattle to Miami. You don't got much on that, on that tray to go out there. And if you're doing long time, I can do so much more, in little space to go out there. And I just got hooked.
That's true. That's very smart. That's very smart. All right. I'm going to also ask a different kind of question. What is the least favorite computer you've ever owned?
Oh man. So I got to diss someone on one of these.
It could be, like an old model or one that didn't work well for you. Just whatever.
I'll go back to originally, and I have been around a long time. When IBM came out with those PS2s, I thought that was really kind of cool look. But when standard things didn't work on it, so IBM had this philosophy that you can only use specific boards in those kind of machines. So we had to expand it. So those PS2s really kind of drove me crazy on that. I worked in a large law firm. We started buying a bunch of IBM products and we were used to swapping components. But when you had everything that only worked on their micro channel, it was just one of those things that was like, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. And talk about paying 6 times the price for everything. So I kind of bring up one of those that are out there. I think we've all had, lower end kind of laptops. And I think as we started talking earlier in the show, when you're used to something good, you can't go back.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. All right, we'll do one more hardware related question. Rich, what do you want to ask him?
We've talked about laptops and phones. What I'm tempted to ask about is your favorite all-time, and we got into the Palm stuff. This might be too repetitive, but I'm curious, like your favorite portable device, mobile device outside of phones and notebooks.
So I will say that first time that I opened up an iPad, when you think about that, it was the overall presentation. I think that Apple really thought that out. And I don't own anything Apple other than iPad and iPhone. But I think that first, iPad, that whole experience of unwrapping it, the gorgeous little box, and then having, something without a keyboard, think about it. We went with that when that came out, like, oh, you mean I'm going to do everything on screen? And I was truly untethered to be there. And, it was kind of cool of just having an app, and lo and behold, I thought I didn't have to patch because we were so used to Windows at that point. But I think that whole iPad piece that was there touched a lot of different tablets and stuff like that. but no brain kind of work, an app. You never had to really figure out how to use it. I thought that was kind of the cool changing point in, breaking up a phone and sort of like a laptop or a mobile device, but definitely kind of cool. I love those.
Very cool. I am going to ask one more just because I can, because I'm here and I'm the host, so I can do whatever I want. What is the weirdest gadget you've ever owned?
Oh man, the weirdest gadget. Well, I will say that at first it had to be this track mouse, because when I first saw them, we used to make fun of them at that point. But in some of these new gadgetries, looking to go, and I'll say I just bought it. The 40-inch monitor puts my webcam pretty high, so it's angled down. I had to play with it. So I just bought this thing that was supposed to be able to stand on the desk. It was like the hardest metal cable. I just returned it. So think of it as a hard bike lock that was supposed to be able to hang my webcam down, so it was like face view. I just actually returned it this morning. That was there. But I'm gonna hang something from my monitor, and I'm thinking, okay, I get it that you want to be face viewed when you have a big monitor, but now I'm staring at something hanging from the top of my monitor that's holding the camera. So it was just a weird kind of thing. But I thought it was a good idea when I bought it, but I could barely bend it and get it all in place there. So it was just a weird kind of thing. I don't know what I was thinking, but it was everyone joked about how they used to get hooked on ordering things from QVC. I was thinking about it. I saw an ad and went right to Amazon, and it was there the next morning.
Very fun. That's a fun one. Very cool. Well, kind of a fun little segment just to kind of talk gadgets and gear and old stuff, which I always love talking about hardware and old hardware and new hardware, any hardware, because nerds like me like hardware. That's how it is. Well, very fun stuff. Awesome stuff. Michael, hang on. We're not going to say goodbye quite yet, because now that Rich is here, last week we weren't able to kind of go down what we might have missed and what was coming ahead, because Rich wasn't here, and Rich is the only one that can see the future. So Rich, tell us what we missed for 2 weeks and what's coming next week.
Well, you know what? The quickest, easiest way to catch up on stuff in the industry you may have missed is to read our In Case You Missed It post, written by our own James Gaskin, every Friday, ChannelProNetwork.com. I said before, it was a light news week, but we've been talking about hardware. Microsoft announced a new Surface Laptop Go, sort of their entry-level device. I think $599 starting point there. We'll have a little information about that. A new smart podium solution from ViewSonic, which is kind of interesting. A new security software solution from ESET. And then a story from overseas, from Europe, that will warm the heart of anyone who hates getting lost in automated message systems when they call customer support. And I'll just leave it at that. James will tell you a little bit about what that's all about. Now, in terms of what's coming up, light week for the news this week, not so much next week. Next week is going to be giant, folks, because in addition to our show in Dallas, which is, of course, the highlight of the week in the industry, ConnectWise is hosting their latest IT Nation Secure event in Orlando. The first face-to-face holding of the RSA Security Conference in San Francisco takes place. I will actually be at that show. I'm going to go straight, and I do mean straight, from our show in Dallas, take a flight that night out to San Francisco, and I'm going to be meeting with all sorts of security vendors in San Francisco at RSA. I am looking forward to that. There will be a ton of security news next week announced in conjunction with that show. Extreme Networks is doing a show in Nashville. Sage is doing its partner conference right up the street from us in Dallas. So there's going to be a lot going on next week, and a lot of it, I think, is going to have to do with security.
Very cool. And it's important to point out that because it is an event week next week, we do not have a show next week. So we'll get all those stories out, done. Go to channelpronetwork.com and read up on them, but we'll be back the following week with episode 228. And I'm sure we'll talk about a lot of that stuff that came from his trip to RSA and the ChannelPro Forum, and any other news and stories that hit. We'll talk about them at that time. So with that, Michael Goldstein, the president CEO of LAN Infotech, I knew I was going to remember eventually. Thank you so much for coming on. Great having you with us. And for those who wanted to learn more about you, get in touch with you, connect with you, where can they go? How can they do that?
LANinfotech.com. You can find me also on LinkedIn, LAN Infotech on Twitter. And guys, it's always great talking with you. It's I learned so much, and it's great being put on the spot to challenge you. So I think this has been amazing.
Awesome. It's always a pleasure having you on. It's great that you had fun. And of course, I'm sure we will see you back down the road somewhere along the line, and we look forward to that. In the meantime, folks, where can you go? ChannelProNetwork.com is where you should go each and every day. Bookmark it, set it as your home page, visit it at least twice a day. It's like medication for your business soul. Morning and night, make sure you're doing that. And then there you'll find, again, all the latest news, articles, resources, white papers, downloads, all kinds of great stuff that'll help you not only manage your business better, but help you make more money, keep you on top of what's going on in the industry. ChannelPro Weekly is the podcast to subscribe to, where everywhere podcasts are found, on the Apple, the Google, the Spotify, all of those. Make sure you subscribe, leave a comment, leave a rating if you can. That's always a very, very helpful thing to do. If you like to watch on YouTube, you can subscribe to us there, hit the bell for notifications, and leave a comment there as well. Always appreciate it. And I'll even see that. So if you're gonna put a comment on YouTube or what for this show, tell us what your favorite laptop of all time was, and tell us what your least favorite computer is of all time. We'll put those two questions there, or anything else hardware wise you want to share with us. We want to hear it. Podcast at channelpro.com is the email address if you'd like to email us, and of course follow us on all of the socials. We're on all of those as well. And with that, we're going to say, and I also want to give a big thank to Rick Jordan and his staff again for that kind of cool collaborative conversation that we did together. That's really exciting stuff. And hopefully we'll do some more of that down the road. And with that, we will be back in episode 228 in 2 weeks. So folks, if you're in Dallas, make sure you get there and come see us in person. We will see everybody else in a few weeks. See you then.